On this episode, we traveled to Adelaide to meet the director of Injury Prevention SA. Then we learn about a pedestrian advocacy group, Walksafe SA. We talk with a community leader about obstacles to pedestrians. In Sydney, planners had to accommodate 400,000 pedestrians each day for the Olympics. Finally, in Canberra, recreational walkers have a choice of walking groups. Stay tuned. We're in Adelaide talking with Elizabeth King, who's director of Injury Prevention SA. What is Injury Prevention SA?
Injury Prevention SA is a private organisation which promotes the public health interests of reducing injuries in the community. So we have a strong emphasis on reducing both fatalities and injuries that are life-threatening.
What are the major areas of injuries that you deal with?
Well, we're pleased that injury is now one of the national goals and targets for Australia, and there are some general rules of thumb, I suppose, that we work to, as well as some community interests, but they tend to be injuries around old people, trying to maintain an active, independent lifestyle, certainly road trauma, gun control is another one, child safety, product safety. So we really cover a very broad range of public health interests.
What approaches do you take to looking at injuries?
We have a very strong emphasis on reducing the risk. So we've got a very strong methodology around environmental control. So we want to reduce the likelihood of an injury through minimising the risks in the environment.
Where do you get involved in pedestrian issues?
Pedestrian injuries has probably been one of our longest serving passions and interests. It certainly affects all people in Australia. Some people advocate there's 19 million pedestrians, so there's 19 million people to be concerned about what's happening on our roads for pedestrians. But we actually started down that road with the interest or combined interest from a surviving victim. Tragically, his daughter was killed on one of South Australia's roads, and it was frustrating for him when he tried to push the concerns that he had about the safety for pedestrians in his local neighbourhood. So we formed a partnership which has seen rise to a small advocacy group called Walksafe. So the two interests, pedestrian group Walksafe SA and combined with Injury Prevention SA's interest, we're trying to get pedestrian safety on the agenda.
We've got a roundabout here behind us. What are some of the problems with it?
Well, this is a well-known black spot as far as road crashes in South Australia. It's a wonderful piece of engineering design. It has 5 roads all trying to gain access to the one roundabout. It is notorious for vehicle crashes, and it seems to dominate. And I suppose the one thing that's missing in the whole debate is pedestrian safety. And perhaps one of the reasons that's the case, it's missing from the debate, is because pedestrians fear for their life just crossing it. So needless to say, we have very few pedestrians trying to access the roundabout, but the reality is its design inherently is lethal for pedestrians.
How does the system work that pedestrians would or would not get attention here? What's the problem?
Well, in South Australia we have a lack of focus on pedestrian safety. We have a very keen interest in what's happening for motorists, which is sort of across the Western world, but we also have a strategy for cyclists. And at the end of the day, pedestrians continue to be the poor relation. Injury Prevention SA, along with a number of other safety, community and health groups, have actually been lobbying our local state government to put pedestrian safety on the transport agenda. But time and time again we see 1 step forward and 10 steps back. So we will continue to advocate and to get media attention, and unfortunately it's often through the most grimmest of realities. For example, this week in South Australia we had an incredible situation of 3 pedestrian deaths over the space of 48 hours. I mean, we have an average total of about 19 to 20 pedestrian deaths. So as far as comparisons with other states, it's quite small, but for this state that is a very significant issue that we're now really taking a huge retrograde step in the number of pedestrian deaths within the first 2 months of the year.
We're in Adelaide talking with Robert Crocker with Walksafe SA. What is Walksafe SA?
Well, we're a pedestrian advocacy group founded about 5 years ago, and our particular interest is pedestrian safety and access. We're a community-based group, and we try and work with local communities in improving the plight of pedestrians generally in the state. And we've worked with the police a couple of times, but our main interest is in helping local people in communities around the state develop strategies to improve particular problem areas. For example, areas where we have high speeds and kids can't get to school, or areas where there are not enough facilities, that kind of thing. So.
And the road we're on used to have a speed problem. What was the situation here?
This is one of the examples of our great successes. This used to be a main road. It was actually a feeder road between two sections of main road. And it was used as a shortcut, or sometimes called a rat run, with commuters tearing down here at 60 or 70. And it's a road that's singularly unsuited to high-speed traffic because we're right by the beach, and these are basically under our feet are the old sand hills. And so wherever there's a crossroad there, you have these little dips in the road, and you've got bad camber. What used to happen is that people would come through here, and we've had a number of fatalities on this road. And it was at this point where the local community developed a very strong interest, and we had a campaign running for about 2 years where we forced the council to first of all put in roundabouts, and then in order to discourage traffic coming through this section of road, we introduced a 40k zone. And that's been extremely successful in that one of the main problems was that cars would prefer this section of road because it's closer to the beach, and therefore the view's better for the drivers than the designated main road, which was down there on Military Road. The trouble is that this is a road not really designed to take 10,000 cars a day. It's designated a local road. And our problem was with the council, who had granted the hotel the rights for a bottle shop, and therefore reluctant to reduce traffic volume on this road. And so for about a year we had quite a strong political confrontation with the council. We had a poster competition where all the residents put up big signs saying hands off our road, this kind of thing. And eventually the council gave in and instituted, first of all they put in roundabouts, which is a good first step, and then they put this 40k zone up. And that took, I think in all, about 2 years. My main criticism of all this is that at the moment in Australia there's no proper mechanism for public consultation. Very, very hard for local people to have any effect at all on a system run by engineers, mainly for cars. And while most of us have to drive, the trouble is that if you're young, or if you have children, or if you're old, you also have to do a lot of walking. And it's not fair that so many people in the community are treated as second-class citizens, once they get outside their front door. And so our inspiration is really one of having a fair go for pedestrians, because if you're under 20 or you're over 60, it's very likely that you will depend on public transport, you will have to do a lot of walking, whereas and people who drive tend to forget this, that there are other people out there who cannot use cars for various reasons. And it's not really fair to consign them to a situation that exposes them to great danger. And it is severe danger, because in Australia we have very high urban speed limits, higher than in America, 60k, which effectively, because of the police standing order, means that you can travel legally up to 69k, 69 kilometres an hour, which is very high. And it means that if you hit a pedestrian, in that 60k zone area of speed, it's very likely that it'll be a serious accident or a fatal accident. Whereas under 40, pedestrians have something like an 80% chance of survival. So we're very informed about the health side of all this, and we're also very keen to engage with the public authorities to help change public perceptions about speed and about safety. Because sooner or later, you're a pedestrian, and once you get out of your car, you're putting yourself in a position where you're likely to be hit, especially if you're old. I think in this area here we have probably 7 or 8 fairly large homes for the elderly, and nearly all of them are on the other side of the main road down there. And for them to access the beach is a major problem. Most of them expose themselves to considerable risk getting across that main road and getting up here to this minor one, where the problem is no longer so great. But in the past they had to cross 2 major roads, and we're still trying to get action on the one down there. So,
yeah. What is the situation? What rights does a pedestrian have crossing a major road?
In Australia, basically none, unless there is a designated pedestrian crossing. So,
how common are those?
They're too rare. Because we inherited from the British an engineering standard that says that it's called a warrant, and it's a numerical formula worked out on the basis of numbers of pedestrians per hour on an average day, an average hour, and numbers of cars intersecting with that. And what it means is that you need around 60 pedestrians an hour to earn the right, under this present regime, to have a pedestrian crossing installed. The problem is that you never get this number of pedestrians in the average Australian suburb. So what this means is that usually a pedestrian crossing in Australia indicates either an older zebra crossing or somewhere where 2 or more pedestrians have been killed, which is a shocking thing. It means basically that pedestrian crossings are monuments to dead pedestrians, which is, I think, totally wrong. It's too reactive, this approach. They need to rethink how they go about it, and we've been pushing for this for a long time. We're very keen on getting safety auditing, which is a much more reasonable way of assessing risk, or better still, some knowledge of urban geography. Why pedestrians like to go here, for example. They want to go to the beach, or they want to go to the shops. To us, that is a much more reasonable way, working out what are the pedestrian routes through an area. But so far we have not been successful in persuading any engineer that this is a logical or workable methodology to use. Instead, at the moment they're in a sort of a halfway land between the old numerical system, which most of them don't believe in very strongly anymore, and safety auditing, which is very expensive. So as a result, we have a system where there's a sort of a cultural change going on, and on the whole they're quite willing to talk to us and quite willing to hear our point of view, but we haven't seen any evidence that they're actually willing to change their system yet.
We're in Adelaide talking with Peter Anastarsiadis. What's been your involvement with community issues?
I've been involved with the Thebarton Residents Association and a councillor in the local government, and we live in an area that's a suburban area on the immediate western precinct of the city of Adelaide. We're landlocked by major arterial roads, And since moving here, we recognised that we needed good access to the parklands of the City of Adelaide, and traffic management issues became a major issue for the Thebarton Residents Association, and that was my involvement. I've been concerned about maintaining the pedestrian access to the parklands and improving the safety of access across the railway lines, both freight and suburban railway lines that are a barrier to our access to the city and the parklands.
And to get to the parklands in the city, you have to cross the road behind us and then the two sets of rail tracks. How difficult is that?
Well, this road that we can see behind us was redeveloped about 4 or 5 years ago. It was a local road before that, but increasingly it had become used as a de facto ring route, avoiding the city. And the department has sort of made this, as part of a plan for a ring route north-south, and there's been increasing traffic. With the development of the road here, there was an opportunity for improving access. There was originally going to be a closure of this pedestrian access, but our group was successful in maintaining the access and somewhat improving it. The only way we've got to get across to the city is either by two bridges which go over the railway lines, or this crossing here. One needs to be pedestrian smart to get across these roads. There's high volumes of traffic at peak time. I don't have any problems, as a runner or an adult pedestrian. I'm able-bodied, but with children, with families, with children on bikes and older people, it's a complicated crossing because there's, as I said, the large volumes of traffic. There's trucks. And there's reduced visibility because you don't actually see the vehicles until they're about 100 or 80 metres away because they're coming from the bridge out of view. And to our south, behind us, there's a curve in the road, and again there's limited view of the traffic, and there have been some concessions with the median strips being put in, but again, one needs to be, very, very cautious with the crossing the railway lines. There's been some fencing and some barriers put in to slow the movement of people and make them aware that that they're going to be crossing railway lines. There's a subway that goes underneath the suburban train line, but the complexity here is that we're using some routes which don't meet disability standards, and there's a series of barriers that you've got to pass. There's the local roads, then the arterial roads, then there's the freight trains, the suburban trains, until you get into the parklands, and so it's a complex demand. It requires demands in terms of concentration, and you can imagine that a young person or an older person who's slow or someone who's in a wheelchair would certainly have difficulty here. And if you're somehow impaired by alcohol or inebriated, then there's potential for damage or injury on that basis as well.
How sympathetic is the government when you tell them that something needs to be done for pedestrians?
Well, we had quite a vigorous campaign to put in an elevated walkway or if that wasn't going to be possible, which an elevated overpass which met disability standards. The minister scoffed at the suggestion and said that it was impossible, that engineering it was impossible, but I find that hard to believe. The alternative at level crossing is to put in traffic lights, but the department is basically interested in keeping the traffic moving and having the pedestrians stop for the traffic and wait for there to be a break in the traffic rather than the pedestrians having the right to stop the traffic. So we're always second best, and there's been some concessions, which have certainly improved the safety, but it hasn't gone far enough. And I think they're limited by, economic rationalism. They don't want to spend as much as they should. They want to defer the pedestrian access and safety issues. In fact, when they were going to close the pedestrian access, they were in the invidious position, which couldn't have been supported, where they actually were going to require people to walk upstairs, across a bridge, downstairs to actually access the suburban train line, which was so ridiculous. It was I was not surprised that they actually kept the level crossing at the end of the day. The government is deferring it to when a new bridge might be built to the north, but I think that we're still going to have a battle with the Department of Transport and the government to ensure that an improved access can occur, and pedestrians aren't high on the priority when the roads are built. We had to agitate to get these improvements. It wasn't an automatic process of the design. It was a campaign that was required.
We're in Sydney, Australia, talking with John Webster. What was your job in planning for the Olympic Games?
Well, John, basically my job was to ensure that the 400,000 or so people who arrived in the park every day could get to their venue and from their transport terminals in a safe and timely manner.
Now, how did the other agencies work on getting those people to the park? Did they drive? How'd they arrive?
No, there was no private access at all, other than walking in or cycling. Very early on, it was a stated government aim that you could really only arrive in the park by public transport. The majority of those trips were by train, perhaps 30% were by bus, majority of trains.
So you have these huge crowds arriving, train load arrives. How do you get them around the site then?
Well, that was a major challenge because the station was designed to handle up to 50,000 people per hour arriving in the peak mode. Basically what we had to do was we had to sort of use a highway analogy for them and introduce a one-way flow. It's very difficult to get crowds to cross through each other at high densities. It's a very uncomfortable environment for them to be in, and it can gridlock, they can stop. So our aim was that you only ever merged into another crowd and then you peeled off again. There was no 90-degree cross movements. We had lots of signs out there, we had lots of staff. And yes, people had to work slightly further, but at the end of the day, unless it was particularly busy, we didn't really stop moving either. It was a much better environment.
The Olympics went on for a number of days. Were you able to adjust from day to day as you saw what was going on? How did your planning work for that?
Yes, we were fortunate in that the first week of the Olympics there was no stadium event. In total on site there was something like 220,000 venue seats, of which the stadium was 100,000. So just about half. So the stadium really dominated both the ingress and the egress of pedestrians. So in the first week with no stadium, it meant that the staff could get settled in, the transport modes could get settled in, because the level of service was the same throughout. They had the same number of trains, they were just a little bit emptier. We could check if we got complaints about signage being unclear. We quickly learned where people wanted to go to, because whether the stadium was on or not, people want to go to the toilets, they want to go to the nearest hamburger. And so we knew where we could put staff ready for the enormous differences in the second week when the stadium came online.
Looking back, what do you feel was the key to your success?
All right, two things, really three things if I may. One was it was the Olympics. And because it was the Olympics, people forgave a lot. Like I said, some people had to walk slightly further because it was a one-way system. But it was the Olympics, and hey, people were willing to walk a little bit further. They were much more tolerant of queues because it was the Olympics. Secondly, we planned the pedestrian site, but we also supplied the staff and we operated the site. So the operator was also the planner. So there was no handover, which meant we understood why it was. And thirdly, because we'd been brought on to do the design so early on, we had the budget and the ability to design this one-way system, which really did try to design out congestion. Didn't always work, but it would have been far worse if we weren't designing this one-way system.
We're in Canberra talking with Lachlan Wilkinson of the ACT Race Walking Club. What is race walking?
Race walking is an Olympic sport, John. It's the one that people would have seen where competitors have to keep one foot on the ground at all times, and when their forward foot hits the ground, their knee must be straight.
And for people that are more into slow walking rather than race walking, what other organizations are here that they can participate in?
Well, there's quite a few opportunities for walkers here. We've got some great walking facilities with the network of bicycle paths that we have, and also the various parks and the forest around Canberra. There's two other groups that are very active in promoting walking. One is the ACT Walking for Pleasure, and they have around 500 members. They organise walks about 3 or 4 times a week. And they're held at different parts around Canberra, and they get a pretty good turn up to their walks. They take their time, they enjoy the scenery, have lunch along the way. Some of their walks might be an hour, 2 hours in length. The other big event that we have here each year is organised by the Canberra 2-Day Walk Committee, and it's based on the multi-day walks that are quite popular in Europe, and I believe also in the United States. There's a few events along this line. It's part of the International Marching League series of walks around the world, and walkers come along. There's a set distance that they do each day, and it depends on your age group what your distance to be able to qualify for a medal is. Young blokes like me have to do 30 kilometres each day. And I think last year they had about 750 walkers, and it's been growing at about 10% each year with an increasing number of overseas walkers.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.